Hello, everyone. Welcome to IMPRINT. I'm Varun Kular, and we'll be looking at the Indian Express and the Hindu Daily News Discovery for the date 10th of December 2018. So I think we can start. Okay, so what are the various topics we're looking into? We're looking at the Citizenship Amendment Bill, and this is extremely important for prelims, so I would suggest that this is something that you should definitely go through in detail. Then we're looking at the Accessible India campaign, right? This is an important topic for mains. Then we have gender equality and food security. This is a very interesting article. Definitely you should go through this. Then obviously US-China tensions and the arm race. I think this is a question which is as expected as the moon coming, rising in the day, right? So that was going to happen. So this is, I would say, you should definitely write an answer on this US-China tension. Then tyranny of the majority, the Hindu editorial, the judiciary, right? We're looking at. Then we have GS3 bioplastics. It's a very interesting topic. I think along with microplastics, this is one thing that definitely you should prepare. Air pollution as a topic, definitely important. We're looking at some defense news regarding the various the chief naval staff asking for another aircraft carrier, right? And that's from the Hindu Express Explain page. The agrarian crisis, right? This is from the Hindu's ideas page, op-ed page, right? Miscellaneous economy news. Then obviously Dalits and sexual harassment in GS1. So the Citizenship Amendment Bill. So we have a contentious Citizenship Amendment Bill, and it is pending in Parliament, but the Home Ministry has notified amendments to the Citizenship Rule 2009 to include a separate column in the citizen form for, belonging to 6 minority communities from Bangladesh, Afghanistan, and right, Pakistan. Right. So basically, it has an entry. Do you belong to one of the minority communities from Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Pakistan, etc.? So basically, are you a Hindu, or you are a Sikh, or are you a Buddhist, Parsis, right? Christian, right? And the center has made changes under the Section 18 of the Citizenship Act. Okay. Now, very interesting. The problem with this would be that it might be constitutionally challenged as it violates Article 14, right? Right. Okay. So that's a problem. Now, the Parliamentary Committee, which has been examining the Citizenship Amendment Bill that proposes citizenship to 6 persecuted minorities, Hindu, Jain, Sikh, Parsis, Christians, and Buddhists from Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Bangladesh who came to before, right, India before 2014. It has run into resistance because obviously it is giving, citizenship to, right, Hindu migrants from Bangladesh in Assam. So obviously the NRC versus the Citizenship Amendment Bill is going to be one of the issues, right? Especially in the BJP. Okay, just to remind you, around 40 lakh people in Assam had been excluded from the final draft of the National Register of Citizens. It was published on July 30th. And obviously, the Home Rulers, the Home Ministry has re-notified rules empowering the 44 collectors in 7 states, except Assam, to accept online application from those belonging to the 6 communities from Bangladesh, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. Right. Then we have the Accessible India campaign. This is very interesting. So now, one of the interesting things about physical disability is the fact that there's hardly access to the various public places, right? So what has happened is, despite the fact the government has notified the persons the Disability Act, what has happened is that the rules have not been made. And if you look at Delhi, which is the capital of the country, right, the rules have been very, very poorly implemented. Right, so that is what this article is all about. You can go through this, but more than that, what is important is, let's go through what is the Accessible India campaign. So the Accessible India campaign is a nationwide campaign of the Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disability, Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. The aim of the campaign is to make barrier-free and conducive environment for Divyangs all over the country. Right, and the campaign is based on the principle of social model of disability, that disability is caused by the way society is organized and not the person's limitation and impairment. The physical, social, and structural attitudinal barrier prevent people with disability from participating equally in the socio-cultural and economic activities. And a barrier-free environment facilitates equal participation. And obviously, the campaign has a vision to basically build an inclusive society in which equal opportunities are provided for growth and development of persons with disability, so that they can lead, productive, safe and dignified lives. Now, what should be done? Basically, you should build an environment for people who are disabled as well, right? Create infrastructure which is there, then transport for them, and obviously, information and communication technology ecosystem should be done, right? So the built environment accessibility component of the accessible India campaign basically says that there should be complete accessibility and audit of accessibility of the government, most important government building in 15 cities. That they should be made fully accessible by the end of the year, right? Making 50% of the government buildings of the NCT and the state capital fully accessible by December 2018, completing the accessibility audit of 50% of the buildings and making them accessible in the 10 most important cities, towns of states not covered in the targets 1 and 2. So that is the idea. Then you can actually see very interesting. So this is, the joint secretary in the Ministry of Social Justice, right? And he basically, if you see very interestingly, his name and designation, etc., is mentioned in the Braille script also. Now, this is something that an example you can use in your case study or your ethics paper, right? And you can quote this, and obviously this can actually go a long way in making clear what is actually required, right, for disability access. Then transport accessibility, obviously all international and domestic airports have to be made immediately accessible. There should be safety features, there should be ramps, there should be accessible toilets, electric braille symbols, outreach signals, etc. Then is obviously the accessibility of information and communication system, right? And this obviously has to be made. Also, the government websites have to become accessible to the disabled as well. Okay, so the IMPRINT answer writing challenge for the day, right? So Accessible India campaign is a step towards dignified life for the disabled. Discuss and also elaborate on the challenges faced to make this campaign a success. So I think this is a question which you should be able to answer. Please try this and send it to us on a Telegram group. Okay, gender equality and food security. Now we have Beena Agrawal, right? And she's a visiting professor at the University of Cambridge, and she's also a professor, right, at the University of Manchester. So let's say what she says. She says countries globally, including India, have agreed to fulfill the SDGs launched by the UNDP, right, as a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that all people enjoy peace and prosperity. And among the 17 goals and 169 targets to be achieved by 2030, SDGs, 5, she's saying, on gender equality seem to be a major goal, right? Okay, so basically she says household food security is very, very important, right? She says that food security, right, promoting food security, right, that is a requirement for having gender equality. Okay, and why is that? She says women play key roles in provisioning food as producers, home managers, and consumers. And they constitute a high and growing proportion of farmers. So feminization of agriculture is there, right? So in India, 35% of Indian agricultural workers, right, are farm women. And women, farm operators grew from 12.8 to 13.9% between the last 5 years itself, 2010-11 to 2015-16. Right, and not counting women, working on male managed farms. Okay, so remember, women productivity depends crucially on access to land, which is highly gender equal because of male bias in inheritance, right? Government land transfers and market access. Even in the southern states of Karnataka and Kerala, only 19 to 20% females actually own land. And remember, they have very, very poor access to credit, irrigation, inputs, technology, and markets. So something needs to be done for them. She says, as agriculture gets feminized, because obviously migration is happening and male are going towards places where more money can be earned, the challenge of dealing with climate change, which is predicted to lower crop yield, will increasingly fall on women. And few of them have access to technical advances such as heat-resistant crops or water-conserving practices. And the higher temperature will increase the labor in food processing and preservation. And a fall in household food will also make females more, they will basically get more affected because there'll be unequal intra-household allocations. And as female anemia is much, much higher in Indian female, right? 53% of Indian women are anemic. as compared to 22% men into 15 to 49 age group. So that tells you that females don't get food allocation, right? So besides, as family food managers, women autonomy in food allocation decisions is adversely affected by their limited asset ownership. Child survival, child nutrition are found to be notably better if mothers has the asset, right? So that's there. Women also contribute to food systems through forests and fisheries. 1 in 6 persons globally depend on forest for supplementary food, right? And green manure, fodder, etc. Women are the major gatherers of food products, especially food and firewood, and the latter continues to be a primary cooking food, and obviously this basically cooking energy is obviously essential for food security. So we must basically shift from cleaner fuels to given the effect of kitchen smoke on obviously human health. And then she says, seafood also a source of protein for a billion people. And women constitute 46% of the workers in small-scale fisheries and 54% in inland fisheries. Okay, though marine products are harvested mainly by men, it's in aquaculture the women domain is globally going faster, and basically it is predicted that it will basically produce 50% of the fish consumed by 2020. So against the backdrop, they're saying that the potential lies in focusing on women access to land and property and natural resources. And secure the land rights for women can improve both productivity as farmers and family nutritional allocation. And women can obtain the land via the family, especially inheritance with the market and the state. And obviously 5A targets only mentions the inheritance laws, but remember, since 86% of arable land is privately owned, gender equality in family land would improve tenure for women security in farmers. Right, and then also SDG 5 mentions families, the financial services, affordable credit, right? Obviously, it also emphasizes natural resources, but it does not specify forests or fisheries. So it's obviously, if policy makers so interpret it, it would enhance the nutritional diversity and also give women role in forest, food, and fisheries. Right, and then they're saying target 4.5 emphasizes women participation in public life, though it focuses on legislatures and village council. It could be extended to community institutions managing forest and water. That is very, very important, I would say. Right, then they're saying that limitation there is on SDG 5. It's basically looking into the fact that the target 5A on inheritance is diluted in accordance with national laws, which is basically a loophole to bypass the goal mandate, right? And social norms obviously will obstruct such legal rights, as good sisters, would forget their claims to parental property, and distant marriages also would reduce women's ability to manage inheritance land. So obviously, government policy cannot directly change norm, and obviously SDG is silent even on government land transfers to women. Okay, so that is one thing, right? So therefore, this is saying that we need to do something, and we need to connect the different SDGs, right? SDG 5 should be connected to SDG 1 and SDG 2, which is no poverty and no hunger, right? And also should be connected to SDG 13, which is climate change, right? And on forest and on marine resources. Right, and finally she says beyond SDGs we need institutional innovations, and she said that my research in Kerala found that women group farmers outperform individual farms in annual production and profits. So therefore she's saying that women are better managers, better farmers. They should be the manage. Okay. US-China tensions in the world, obviously very interesting. So the ex-NSA, Shiv Shankar Menon, he's saying that right now what is happening, we have the history's greatest arms race, right, between USA and China, and ill-defined Indo-Pacific concept. Okay, so what he's saying is that, remember what USA and Japan basically are looking at. They are looking for a free and open Indo-Pacific, okay, which basically concedes the continent order to China and leaves the maritime order to rest of us. And it does not serve India's purpose, because India is both a continental and a maritime power. Right, so we need to do something, right? And obviously the other countries in the region, right, are reacting to China by strengthening their global militaries. So we are having the greatest arm race in Asia right now. Tyranny of the majority. So let's look at Neera Chandoke and her article. She's a former professor of political science. So this article is important for anyone who has political science optional. So that is the key here. So what does it say? So she's saying India is bombarded with electoral rhetoric that is shorn of care for citizens who actually inhabit the desolate world. So let's see what she says. She says every person who aspires to political power ought to read the book, The Consideration on Representative Government, right, by John Stuart Mill. She says ideally democracy is not the best form of government, wrote Mill, unless it ensures that the majority is unable to reduce everyone but itself to political insignificance. The book neatly demolishes facile arguments that a majority group has some unspecified right to imprint its will on the body politic. Right? In democracies, the very idea of majority rule is trumped by the grant of fundamental rights, and paramount among these rights is the right not to be discriminated against on the basis of religion, caste, gender, sexual preferences, etc. And what group we belong to, right, is what faith we profess, what language we speak. Obviously, it is irrespective of that, each citizen should have a equal share in the political system. And here is what a moment is. Then she basically starts talking about our constitution makers, right? She says H.V. Kamnath move an amendment in the Constituent Assembly. He suggests we should, begin with the phrase "in the name of God," right? And this was by H.V. Kamnath in the Constituent Assembly. Then Shibal Lal Sena and Madan Mohan Malviya, right, also basically move similar amendments. But others vociferously disagreed. He observed that we should not impose our feelings on others. We invoke the name of God, but I make bold to say that while we do so, we are showing a narrow sectarian spirit, which is contrary to the spirit of the Constitution. Right? He says that the amendment gets, obviously, the problem is that we also have atheists who might also be a part of India. So therefore, when we say in the name of God, it should not be there. Okay. So the amendment is defeated. The Constitution obligates the holders of power to respect the principle of religious neutrality. Okay. Now, obviously, remember, the commitment was significant because in the mid-40s, religion was no longer, right, belong to the realm of private faith. It has been transformed into a mode of politics that had laid claim to power in public dominion. Though prominent leaders assured minority time and again they would not be discriminated against for any reason, right? This belief shaped the dark underside of the collective political imagination. Still, there were ideas contained, at least recently, by the intent and framework of the Constitution. So, what she says? She says that let's look at S.R. Bommai versus Union of India. It says that Supreme Court rules that equality is the essential basis of the Constitution. Equality is the default principle, irrespective of the religious affiliation of the states. Correspondingly, the Indian state is not expected to privilege one nation, one religion over another, because it is neither religious nor irreligious. But remember, now it's different. Rulings of the Supreme Court are openly flouted by leaders of BJP and its ideological cohorts. Shrill voices have become more aggressive and translucent. Cadres of the Hindutva Brigade have no hesitation in intimidating citizens, and the foundations of our democratic temple crumble. Now we have, why she's saying that? She's saying we have, provocative statements issued by right-wing leaders in the case of Sabarimala and Ayodhya cases, and political commentators find the escalation of hysteria, provocation, unsurprising. After all, we are at the end of assembly elections in 5 states. General elections are around the corner, right? And every day, the RSS is asking us, right, we should have a Ram Mandir, right? And even today's newspaper does have that. The Prime Minister is required to represent the interest of all Indians. Obviously, he remains silent, and definitely he typically, despite the fact that he finds words for everything else, he cannot find the words to condemn the rising tide of bigotry and hate, and the insistent subversion of democracy. Right? But that's okay, right? At the end of the day, in some ways, you can think of the that it has ventilation of the RSS leaders or the right leaders as well. Okay, so she says that India stands a crucial juncture before the general elections. On one hand is the party in power that has visited ill-being on the people through demonetization and GST, right? As harassment of universities, sabotage of institutions, violation of fundamental rights, the sanction of public lynching, and now obviously a murder of a policeman, right? And gone are the days, the emphasis on Achatin, the commitment to economic development, jobs, agrarian transformation, money in the bank account, and governance. Today, we have little else except religion is vitally threatening form of politics. On the other hand stands the Congress, the inheritor of legacies of Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru. Many Indians hope that the party would relentlessly down on the dangerous threat to constitutional democracy. The party should have tapped minds and hearts with, promised restoration of fundamental principle of constitutional democracy. It should have called for a second freedom struggle. But Congress has become, an anemic version of the BJP. Right? Tilak supporting, temple going, and obviously Gotra conscious, leaders have certainly cropped up in the Congress as well. The BJP has lived up to its ignoble reputation as the party of the majority and for the majority. The Congress has no distinct ideology. It has forgotten the examples set by Nehru, especially during the partition riots. Nehru was physically there in the killing fields of Punjab and in Delhi, persuading people to desist from violence, assuring Muslims safety and protecting Indians against each other. Today, the party is being shy of being, branded as a protector of rights of all Indians. Right? Regional parties are hailed as a perfect institution for federal India, yet most regional leaders and their progeny tend to treat their states as feudal fiefs. Few have a vision that is truly national, and what has happened to the political creativity to project map out new paths, and to confidence that democracy must be truly representative so that the majority does not reduce the others to insignificance. Leaders should take inspiration from obviously Emmanuel Macron, she says. Then she says Angela Merkel, right, courageously took off the most populist leaders of Europe at a function, right, in which was basically for the end of World War One, right. Very interestingly, he affirmed an axiom: patriotism is the opposite of nationalism. In the audience were US and Russian President Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, the two who have actually adopted muscular nationalism as their political credo. Macron urged leaders not to forget the slaughter 100 years after the massacre, whose scars are still visible from the world. Because remember, World War I happened because of this muscular nationalism, or jingoism, as they say. In India, we bombarded with electoral rhetoric that is shorn of care, compassion, or commitment to leaders who live in a fighting, disordered world. The worlds are inhabited by impoverished farmers, insecure workers in the informal sector who lost their jobs after demonetization and imposition of GST. Minorities who are increasingly rendered irrelevant, the so-called lower caste who are deprived of security, women who are subject to hateful stereotypes, right? So what has happened is that elections have given citizens an opportunity to discuss political policies and propose political agendas and exercise free choice. But the problem is the forthcoming elections, obviously breeds pessimism. So obviously she's being a little negative, I would say, in this whole discussion, right? But what she's saying is that there is nobody, who could be a protector of the minorities of India, right? It is actually because remember we're having the first past, right? The post system. Right, because we have this thing, right? Obviously, if you even can get 30 to 40% of the votes, that's good enough. So let's say in India, 82% are Hindus, and of that, if you can get 30 to 40%, you pretty much obviously are enough. So Tilak trotting Gotra conscious leaders are the need of the hour maybe to win elections. Okay, let's look at judiciary. So very interesting thing. What has happened is, in 1981, the Supreme Court passed some orders directing the shifting of some graves in Dushiapur in Varanasi from a Muslim graveyard. Right, the order is yet to be implemented. Now the question is, while some were debating how implementation of the recent verdict of the entry of women of all age in Sabarimala, right, is the order fixed timing for the bursting of firecrackers during was flouted with impunity. So both, whether despite the fact you can have orders. Will they actually be implemented? Okay. Now, interestingly, there were certain other two orders which also the court has passed, and it seems they would remain on paper. The first is the court has asked High Court to designate as many sessions and magistrate courts in the concerned state to try criminal cases against sitting MLAs and MPs. So, do you think the MLAs and MPs will themselves legislate funds for that? Right? No, that's not going to happen. The cat doesn't well the cat themselves. And just for example, the government informed the court that there are 4,122 criminal cases pending against MPs and MLAs in 440 districts across the country. right? So the case takes time to decide. The cumbersome code of procedure must be followed. The charges must be witnessed, read framed. Witness must be examined, cross-examined. Evidences must be adduced in, right? So obviously, only then a well-considered judgment can be delivered. And obviously, remember, witness and even investigating officers can turn hostile in this case, right? The existing number of courts are already overburdened with 33 million pending cases. So only a section of them giving up dealings with the cases before them and only deal with the cases related to ML and MPs, right? So this is going to be a huge issue, obviously, of issue of right to equality as well. Then we have the second, right, interesting thing which has happened, the witness protection scheme. Right, it is well known that nowadays it is nearly impossible to get independent witnesses in criminal cases. If someone sees a crime, the tendency is to avoid getting into trouble by disposing about it to the police or to the court, right? Because it may invite reprisal by the party whom against the witness gives evidence, right? Consequently, the judge is rarely sure that the witness is being truthful. To mitigate the outcome, obviously the government is asked to be frame the witness protection scheme. But whether it is practicable is nothing, because there are over 28.4 million cases, right? Of 70% are criminal cases. On a dozen, there are half a dozen witnesses, right? So remember, how is it feasible logistically, financially, or viable even administratively that so many people will get new identities? Other proposals also appear unrealistic. The scheme mentions police escort, right, to the court, temporary safe houses, relocation of the witness, right? But how simple is it to relocate an individual whose job requires him to be at a fixed location, and for how long and how many years will the police provide protection? So obviously, these orders, if given significant consideration, may go towards the way of the Doshinpura graveyard, which was never implemented. So that's what they say. Okay, let's go ahead. We have the next topic, bioplastics. So what is this? Bioplastics, often promoted as an independent, climate-friendly alternative to petroleum-based plastics, may also lead to increase in greenhouse emissions, right? According to the study. Though I would like to know who did this study and who funded the study, because a lot of plastic companies might have funded the study itself. But okay, it says the increase in consumption of bioplastic the following years is likely to generate greenhouse emissions from cropland expansion on global, right, scale. The plastics are usually made from petroleum, with the associated impacts in terms of for fossil fuel depletion, but also climate change. It would basically be estimated that by 2050, plastics would already be responsible 15% of the global CO2 emissions. On the other hand, principally bioplastics are obviously climate neutral because they are on renewable raw materials such as maize, wheat, sugarcane. These plants get the CO2s, right, from the air through the leaves, and obviously producing bioplastics with the obviously consumes CO2, therefore obviously compensates, which is released at the end of life, and obviously the net greenhouse balance is assumed to be zero. And obviously they are obviously consumed as environmentally friendly alternative, right, as the level of technology that is there at least. Okay, but what the researcher says, the production of bioplastic in large amounts would obviously change the land use globally, and this could potentially lead to an increase in the conversion of forest lands into arable land. Right. However, forests absorb considerably more CO2 than maize or sugar can, only because of the larger biomass. Then they're saying impact of biofuel. Experience with biofuel also has shown it's not a theoretical speculation, they say. The increasing demand for green energy sources have brought massive deforestation to some countries in the tropics. That's what they're saying. Okay, right. They simulated the effects of increased demand for bioplastics in major countries. They used an extended computer model that has already been used to calculate the impact of biofuels, and it basically says that it takes a lot of time for the switch to bioplastic to pay off, and the belief that bioplastic will reduce the amount of waste in oceans may not even come true. Okay. Okay, obviously the same article, right? This is from the Indian Express as well, right? So here they have actually given the data as well in this one. They're saying the area of land used for agriculture increase in taxonomy while forest area just decreases by 0.7%. This translates to enormous quantity of CO2 being emitted in the atmosphere. This obviously considered to occur as a one-time effect, but basically it says is that 20 years seems to be the likely time for savings to be achieved by the fossil substitution. So obviously, the bioplastics, which was seen to be very, very, interesting and often a climate-friendly way, alternative to petroleum-based plastics, doesn't seem to be the way likely. So that is the main issue. Okay, but I would like to see who funded this research, because I would love to see, a plastic company sponsoring this one. Okay, just to have an idea, bioplastics are made from wide range of renewable-based feedstocks, agro-based feedstocks like corn or sugarcane, lignocellulose feedstock, right? Plants that are eligible for food or feed production, then organic-based feedstocks, right, and so on. Okay, just to remind you, go through this, please add this in your notes. Bioplastic are plastic derived from renewable biomass sources such as vegetable fat and oils, corn starch, wood chips, etc. And bioplastics can be made by, obviously by products which are also from plastic bottles or other containers using microorganisms. Common plastics such as fossil fuel plastics, petroleum are derived from the petroleum natural gases, right? Not bioplastics. All of them are biodegradable, right? Okay, or biodegrade more readily than commodity, right? Bioplastic is normally uh, derived from sugar derivatives, lactic acid, starch, cellulose, etc. Okay, just to have an idea. So write this answer. What are bioplastics, and they discuss their potential as well as the challenges of bioplastic. Okay, next topic is air pollution. I think this is a topic time and again, it's again and again coming. I think you guys might be even bored of this topic. But anyhow, let's continue. So, death in the air, right? And the article basically talks about it is time that clean air is made a frontline political issue. It's saying that as an environmental scourge, that is, killed an estimated 1.24 million people in India. Air pollution should be among the highest policy priorities, but the center and state governments have tended to treat it as a chronic malaise that defies a solution. The deadly, results of the official apathy are highlighted in the global burden of disease 2017 report on air pollution, right? The impact it has, the disease burden it has, life expectancy it has been published by Lancet, right? It's saying that millions of people are forced to lead morbid lives or face premature deaths due to bad air quality. And if you think about it, the Indian national standard, right, for P2.5 is notoriously lax at 40 micrograms per cubic meter. But even so, 77% of the population was being exposed to higher levels on average. No state has actually met the annual average exposure norm for PM 2.5 of 10 micrograms per cubic meter set by the World Health Organization. And if the country paid greater attention to the ambient air quality and house air pollution, right? People obviously who live in UP, Bihar, Rajasthan, Jharkhand could add 1.7 years to their life expectancy. And similar gains could be, basically be seen nationwide. But obviously, we have low social development. We have reliance on solid fuels for cooking. We have ambient air pollution caused by stubble burning, and construction dust and unbridled motorization in Delhi would basically lead to even more problems, right? Okay, then sustainable solutions must be found in stubble burning, right, and use of solid fuels in households, right, and those who are responsible must be made accountable for this. They're saying the center is already working with Punjab and Haryana to ensure the machinery is already distributed to farmers and cooperatives to handle agriculture waste in place as working. A mechanism for obviously a rapid collection of farm residue has to be instituted. In fact, new approaches to recover value from biomass could be the way out. And there's a proposal for a furniture maker to convert straw into useful products would be seen, right, to basically have some outcomes. Then we can shift from solid fuel to LPG, right, and it can provide huge health benefits. The Lancet says that the potential of domestic biogas units, solar cookers, improved solar biomass coke stoves has to be explored, since they impose no additional expenditure on rural and less affluent households. And these should be basically complemented with, urban sources of pollution are also there, right? It is just, normally, the Delhi people tend to, complain about, farmers in Punjab, but they forget how much, pollution they are doing themselves, right? So therefore, that is something. India's commitment under Paris Agreement on climate change required a sharp reduction in particulates from fossil fuels may be relatively clean today, vehicles better engineered to cut emissions, but traffic densities in cities have led to a rise in pollution. Real-time, measurement of pollution is also lacking. There are not enough ground-level monitoring stations for P2.5, and studies use, strategy imaging and modeling to project health impact. So we actually need to have rapid progress on clean air and make it a frontline political issue. So this is something. Right? This is a very interesting article, I would say. Agrarian crisis. So this is by Ashok Gulati and Tirtha Chatterjee, and Gulati ji is the Infosys Chair, Professor of Agriculture, and Chatterjee ma'am is a research associate at ICRER. So what they say is that uh, thousands of farmers from various parts of India, right? They came to Delhi on November 29th, 30th, and they registered their protest against Narendra Modi government and perceived apathy and neglect of farmers' demands. They were basically demanding three things: one, debate in parliament to discuss farm distress; two, one-time farm waiver; three, obviously raising the minimal support price to 50% above comprehensive cost, that's C2, and making the MSP legally binding on private traders. That if any trader buys below the MSP, he should be put in sent to prison for at least 3 years. Okay. The march obviously was organized by the All India Kisan Sankarsh Coordination Committee. Several opposition parties of different hues came together to endorse these demands. And remember, state assembly elections are on December 11th, and they will influence how these demands are taken seriously by the government. Now, if you look at the rationality of the demands, right, and the consequences, if they're affected or they're accepted by the people, right, or the powers that be. So accepting a demand for a debate in parliament is easy, and it would help understand the real cause of farm distress and the policies that would help to tackle it. The second demand is of a one-time loan waiver. Although it's well known for farmers that this demand is likely basically for votes, already you will find that from UP, from Andhra, from Maharashtra, from Karnataka, Rajasthan, Punjab, everywhere, around 43,000 crores to something like 5,000 crores farm labor has been done. So overall, together, the figure comes to be 1.82 lakh crores. And remember, we're going to have the elections next year as well. So what will happen is this loan waiver should be more than 4 lakh crores, right? It is interesting that some, states have announced loan waivers. Only few have budgeted it, and while most of them have actually done the zip service. Okay, like Punjab announced a loan waiver of 10,000 crore, but obviously budgeted only 600 crore. And it may be noted that it is better ones in the peasantry, which will benefit most from these moves. The marginal farmers and the others will basically, they depend on the money lenders, and they basically, typically if you think about it, 36% interest rate is charged here. In the article, it's mentioned 24 to 48%. Now, what is needed is a financial inclusion of these small-time farmers in, institutional credit at reasonable rates, and obviously not outright loan waivers, right? Because if they can get a loan at 12%, I think they would be able to repay it, right, with a high probability. These loan waivers would hit public investments in agriculture adversely and even farm distress in due course. It's a vicious circle. The third demand, obviously, is setting MSP and making them legally binding. And although the Modi government has already done they have fulfilled the Swaminathan formulation by giving 50% above the A2 plus FL. People in the business know that they have changed the reference cost from C2 to A2 plus FL. So that's a big problem, which is obviously 38% lower. In any case, MSP-based formula on just cause, that whether it is C2 or A2 plus FL, ignores the demand side, which is patiently inefficient, right? And it will, cost the nation heavily in the due course. It says that even though the current situation, the market prices are below MSP's mark. So look at this, how much below everything is, right? 30%, you can see average 20% is there. Paddy is less, right? Jowar is less. So market prices are actually, and this is a big problem. And government has always focused on 2-3 MSPs, right? So we all, for the solution, we have the Pradhan Mantri Asha, right, Yojana. They try to give some kind of, support through these schemes, right? However, none of the states have implemented the scheme, which MP, which had piloted the PDP scheme, right, in Kharif, discontinued it. And obviously, the PM's Asha has become the farmer's Nirasha. So that's interesting, I would say. Okay, what all this indicates that we need large reforms. India needs, from reforming APMCs to abolishing the essential commodity price, rolling back export restrictions encouraging contract farming, allowing the private sector markets to have competition with the APMC markets, capping commissions fees to not more than 2% of any commodity any place in India. Then we need open trading, right? Negotiable warehouse receipts system, ENAM, and with you were saying, right, grading and delivery and distributor settlement mechanisms. And these need to be done as soon as possible. Once this is done, the major investments need to follow, improving the functioning of markets and building efficient value chains. So this, I think, please note this whole thing, right? These are all solutions. So from here to here, definitely. Then they say that this can be done through PPP model, creating millions of jobs, but needs to be sustained, and obviously efforts are need to be done, right? And this can only be done for a period of 3 to 5 years, and then farmers can hope for a better and suitable price for their produce, right? So this is what they're saying. Obviously, what's the IMPRINT answer writing challenge for this? Agriculture needs a cure more than a quick fix in form of loan waivers. Discuss, also elaborate the challenges of agriculture. So if you have read this article, right, initially you can talk about how loan waivers have actually been happening. So you can make this diagram. Then you can talk about how MSPs are, performing, and then you can actually talk about what are the solutions here, right? Okay, defense news here, as I said in the beginning, what we are looking for, during the annual Navy Day press conference, Admiral Suri Lama said that we are working on a second indigenous aircraft carrier, that is IAC-2, and this would give India's fleet of 3 aircraft carrier, right? But this is very difficult to imagine. Why? Because there's obviously a problem of affordability. Okay, right. It would simply appear that India cannot afford a third aircraft carrier, even if it's desirable, right? So basically, because why? Because if you think about it, it is typically would cost something like 1.6 lakh crores, and that's a lot of money, right? But if we do require it because of the issue we are having these days in maritime trade, because China is actually growing and growing, right? All the world's advanced navies are operating naval aircrafts. We have US, UK, Russia, China, right, China, etc. And remember that the string of pearls theory is something that only we can handle using this. Right, so this is extremely important. Just to have a look, think about what all aircraft carriers we have. We have the INS Vikramaditya, which was formerly Admiral Koshkov. This is in service in 2013. INS Vikrant was scrapped in 2014-15. Right, INS Virat, it was decommissioned last year in March 6, 2017, and we're going to get the INS Vikrant IAC-1, right, and this is under construction, and sea trials are basically going to happen in 2020. Right, so you should remember the names. These can come in objective type questions as well. Okay, so it is Vikramaditya, Vikrant, Virat, and Vikrant. Okay, just to have another article on the Navy, right? So it says, against the backdrop of increasing responsibility in the Indian Ocean and the rising Chinese presence, the Indian Navy has embarked on a major capability upgrade, right? And 35 naval ships were deployed. Navy has undertaken 113 port calls, including operational turnaround this year, and obviously participated in 21 exercises. And this was obviously recently we are having the Indra series of right. This is happening with Russia. Okay, so they're saying that today we have 32 ships and submarines at present under construction in Indian shipyards, and obviously they include the INS Vikrant, right, Indian aircraft carrier, the Project 15B destroyers, the Project 78 frigates, P-28 anti-submarine warfare corvettes, offshore patrol vehicles, Scorpion submarines, etc. And approval also has been given for 56 ships and 6 submarines. So this is something. Why this is all done? This is against the backdrop of China increasing its presence and establishing permanent facilities in the Indian Ocean region, right? And Admiral Ranba says that China deploys 6 to 8 warships in the Indian Ocean region in any time. So obviously we have to counter it, and obviously all these enhancements, obviously are contingent on budgetary allocation, which has not seen a major increase over the last few years, but this is a necessary thing. And we require at least one major ship at critical choke points in the Indian Ocean region, right, in a mission-based deployment, and increased military-to-military engagement with many relations are a part of the diplomacy, right? And this is extremely, extremely important. Okay, now comes next question. Discuss the indigenization of India's defense industry, why it is quintessential in today's geopolitical scenario. Obviously, you talk about China and the Indian Ocean region, the string of pearls, the clash in Indo-Pacific region, and so on. Right. Okay, space technology. Basically, this is just an article saying GSAT 11 had been launched. You should, in case you don't remember that, please look at GSAT 11 in detail. And what is happening is that we're looking for some kind of a internet, communication satellite which is there. So it requires a ground infrastructure. That is all this. They're not really that relevant. Okay, so let's go ahead. Then the current account goes. Okay, so the latest trade figures from the Reserve Bank of India confirm the damage caused by oil prices in the last few months. The CAD widened to 2.9% of GDP in the July-September quarter, right? A 4-year high, increasing pressure from the oil bill. In contrast, the same CAD was on just 1.1% of GDP, right? And this is due to increase, obviously, widening trade deficit, which has jumped to $50 billion, right? Last year it was just 32.5. Okay, so obviously, but the issue is that obviously now the oil prices have dropped, so we would expect that the deficit is likely to come down in the next quarter, right? But it's not actually all is fine. Why? Because there's always a threat of price volatility by heavy importers, right? Because we can always get volatility in oil, right? So what India needs to do, we need to diversify our energy base by tapping into local sources of energy, and obviously it will obviously remain a perennial threat to economic stability. Okay. On the other hand, if you think about it, the widening of the current account deficit per se should not be a worry for India. Why? Because foreign capital inflows are more than enough for, and we are having a very brisk economy. The trouble will only arise if the foreign inflows dry up and restrict the ability to purchase essential commodities such as oil and imports, etc. Also, as liquidity conditions continue to frighten across the world, India heavy import dependence is a cause of concern. Meanwhile, when the Western central banks tighten their monetary policy, RBI will be forced to tighten its own monetary policy to retain investment capital and defend the rupee. Now, this is going to be the problem. And this will impact the domestic economic growth negatively. And each time external account will come under pressure, and the government will try to obviously create some piecemeal emergency measures, such as little opening of the capital account or ill-advised restriction on imports. Such a policy can only manage to kick the can further down the road than bring a permanent solution. And obviously, the government should basically try some implementing structural reforms to boost exports, and thus helping fund imports through other means such as capital inflows and over-reliance on imported oil. So this is the need of that. Then road construction obviously is gathering stream. Some kind of data you can actually get how much. So obviously the length of national highways laid has got a peak, and Mr. Nitin Gadkari is doing a very good job. This is showing the number of projects announced, right? Has been mentioned. The number of obviously 20,000 kilometers are supposed to be awarded in 2018-19. So all these things are there, and so I think you can add this. Right, and what are the various projects? The Bharatmala project, 50.9%. Then your national highway projects, right? So all these are working well. That's fine. So you can just keep this a number data for the infrastructure. Okay. Then we have an article very interesting. It says the world may turn flat for Indian companies thanks to the SEBI panel. But obviously there are suggestions which the SEBI has given, right? So what Thomas Friedman said in his famous book, that is The World is Flat, right? The concept that we could have a level playing field with all companies getting equal opportunity. A very, very crazy idea, right? And this will destroy Indian economy in some ways. A lot of people might think that way. But obviously, a panel of experts appointed by the SEBI in their own little way tried to make the world flat for Indian and overseas companies last year. The panel recommended that unlisted Indian companies should be allowed to do direct equity listing in selected overseas market, and that companies from jurisdictions should also be able to allow to list a share on Indian bourses. And obviously, this is a recommendation. So it's like Flipkart can actually list itself on NASDAQ before even if they want to list on India. So that is something very, very useful. So you can raise capital abroad very easily. The Board of Capital Market Regulator, which is obviously has representatives from RBI and the government, obviously will look into this. Right? Importance of these recommendations can't be disputed. The current regulations bar unlisted Indian companies to list their shares overseas, though such entities could list their depository receipts, which many companies have done. Okay, overseas companies can currently list only their issuing Indian depository receipts, again, which is a non-starter. And there's only just one issuance of Standard Charter, right, in 2010. Okay, so what has happened? The panel has been quite pragmatic in the approach, and obviously would like to keep the current regulatory system in sight. But one system is that it basically is in a plug-and-play model. The regulatory framework has been designed keeping in mind the current framework. So more important, the changes are required, can be done by notification of circular, so there's no need for amendment. So this is the importance of this. Okay, so what is the benefit of this? The firms can obviously benefit in terms of alternate source of capital, broader investor base, and better valuation. Then Indian investors could benefit by enhancing diversification, obviously, and obviously, you can get, even if I'm a shareholder, let's say in some Indian firm, I can get more money and more value from my shares. And obviously, but remember, this is at a nation stage and would require approvals from various areas. Okay, so interesting, but I think let's wait for this to happen. It will become very, very interesting. Right, so let's move ahead. Urjit Patel says that obviously CRR decision is not with the NPC, right? Though obviously there's nothing in the Monetary Policy Committee that it can't discuss or basically talk about CRR reduction in the CRR. Now remember the CRR, the RBI doesn't pay any interest on the CRR, so obviously this is something which RBI takes very seriously. So this is something that everything, somebody will. But remember, the MPC obviously, maybe can do so because obviously it is a liquidity management tool and can impact interest rates. But obviously, normally, they haven't really gone into that. So Ojit Patel saying it's a strict no, not to be allowed. Okay, life-size sculptures to honor Dalit struggles. Right. So in a small village of Vanji Nagaram in Melur in Tamil Nadu stands a sculpture of a man called Kadan. And a Dalit Kadan took on village oppression in the village, spearheaded the movement to draw water from the public well and press for rights. And in 1987, he was hacked to death. So in honor of Kadan's work and sacrifice while seeking equality and basic civil rights, a memorial stone with his, face painted was raised by the Dalits. And such stories of Dalit struggle and sacrifice, which are not really heard in mainstream media and literature, are now being documented by a group of sculptors. Right, and this is Government of Fine Arts. 25 sculptors from various parts of the state are making life-size statues of Dalits who made an impact on surroundings and society. And this is basically an attempt to document and visually showcase 100 years of Dalit history in Tamil Nadu. And these will be shown at the Vanam Art Festival, right? So this is very interesting, and they say that these are people who have largely worked in interior Tamil Nadu, taking on the oppression of Dalits, taking many issues such as access to graveyard, water, civil rights, etc. Some of them were killed fighting for these rights. So obviously this is very, very important. Okay, so I think this is a very good example for any answer on Dalit assertion. Okay, now just to have a look, we have some data on manual scavenging. So look at the number. Please note this data. Please cut this article if you can, even if you take a screenshot if you need to, if you're using some kind of online tool to make your notes. So think about this. The largest number of sewer deaths were in Gujarat from 2015. So it tells you that despite the fact that you have untouchability is banned in India, manual scavenging is there, and it is the worst form of untouchability. So at least it tells you that these states need to do something about it, and the social justice department of these states needs to be taken to task for doing this. And the rehabilitation obviously is also very, very poor in the case of this. And the budget, obviously, allocation for self-employment schemes also has been steep, right? From 448 crores has fell to just 5 crore in 2017. So pathetic all around. So look at UP. It has the highest number of manual scavengers, 11,000. How can you allow that? Okay. And even if you think Chhattisgarh is 3, but I will say that I pretty bet that it's going to be double or triple of even 100 times this number. Okay, the next article is just a political science article. It just talks about the BSP. Not too relevant for us, I would say. It just says the Bahujan Samaj Party finds itself as Ujik's junker and obviously for democratic politics. It has faced trials and formed dissensions, factions, etc. Now, with the Hindutva politics influence base of voters. Dalit leaders are tapping into aggressive language being used against dominant social groups, and obviously are emerging a challenge to their party and its leader, that is Mayawati, by mobilizing the scheduled caste. These leaders have emerged through social movements that have sprung in reaction to atrocities. Initially, as BSP has used this language, right, in a way of mobilization, right? Similarly, like if you remember the Dalit Panther movement in the 70s, all these factors led to obviously BSP, facing a situation when it could emerge stronger or shrink further or lose its significance, right? So basically, data shows that a party's social base has shrunk to the level almost where it began, right? And though the BSP remains a party of significance in terms of vote it recorded in 2014 elections and the UP Assembly elections, it has failed to get the seats that are required. So if you think about it, that there were no MPs that they have right now, despite a vote share of 4% in India. So obviously that is something of a concern. Now, if you think about it, they might actually make alliances. So the JDS, obviously, in Karnataka, Mayawati basically made alliance with them. Then in Congress, right, they tried to form a alliance with these Congress in Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, and Chhattisgarh, right? And then finally they went to Ajit Jogi's Janata Chhattisgarh party, right? So the idea is that whether BSP will make the government or will just act, with the with the BJP to basically make sure the Congress doesn't come into power, right? That is the question that is there, because the BSP can be used by the BJP to make sure that the BJP again comes to power. Now, obviously, if a Mahagatbandhan fails with the BJP, the Samajwadi Party, it would actually be difficult to defeat the BJP and could lead to another poor showing, and it would just mean that the BSP is indirectly supporting the BJP. Okay, sexual harassment. This is very interesting. As all of us have seen air hostesses, and they're immaculate looking, right? Who appear unruffled by the demands of a life spent in the air, right? Obviously, they look extremely good, even male and female both, right? But they basically face a lot of sexual harassment. And Venus Fung, right, who works as a flight attendant with a European airline, said that she was physically picked up by the pilot who touched her inappropriately, commenting that she has a nice body, and when she was new to the job 2 years ago. But she said, I was really angry, but my mind went completely blank and I had no idea what to do and how to react. The cabin manager, obviously, who witnessed the incident, did not intervene, right? Instead, threatening her for wearing a skirt that was too tight. And then, as a result, basically, what happened, Miss Fang stopped wearing skirts at work for more than a year, and now was just opting for trousers instead, right? Then now these days, what she has been doing, she has been training colleagues on how to seek support or report sexual harassment and seek help, right? When a flight attendant comes out, it looks very fancy with the uniform, heels, and makeup. There are fantasies around the industry, and it is hard to change the public perception. But obviously, it cannot be an excuse for bad behavior. She says that obviously education is key to changing the people's attitude. So that is extremely, extremely important, right? And obviously, there are complaints. There's a bikini backlash, because the US-based Association of Flight Attendants called on American Airlines to renounce their past objectification of flight attendants. And Vietnamese budget carrier VietJet, which also staffed some its inaugural flights of bikini-clad attendants, published a calendar of scantily colored models, right, were also criticized for its marketing ploy. Right, so this was something she had to actually get back. Okay, the same is, it's not just the females, it's the males also, right? They also are under scrutiny, and obviously they have to maintain a clear complexion all the time, right? So there's a lot of harassment which keeps on happening here. So what has needed is that in certain areas, definitely there needs to be prevention and elimination of discrimination and harassment at work. Okay, that was it from us today. Please do comment and try the questions which we have posted today on the group.